The bailiff flipped open his folder and began reading the list in a clear, booming voice. When he reached the third item, Judge Harold Miller recoiled in his leather chair, his eyes widening in disbelief. His face shifted from professional concentration to absolute shock in a matter of seconds. He took off his glasses, wiped them with a handkerchief as if he could not believe what he had just heard, and put them back on to reread the document himself. Then he shouted with an authority that made the courtroom walls tremble. "Stop immediately. Call security in here." My 3 children froze. William, who seconds earlier had been smiling with the arrogance of a lawyer who believes victory is guaranteed, turned pale as if he had seen a ghost. Caroline dropped the tissue she had been theatrical, clutching throughout the hearing. Tyler tried to stand up, but his legs would not cooperate. Richard Sterling, that $800 an hour attorney my children had hired to destroy me, opened his mouth, but no sound came out. 2 security officers entered through the side doors, hands hovering near their holsters. The murmur in the room turned into a deathly silence. And I, Eleanor Vance, the 68-year-old woman, whom her own children had just publicly accused of being a senile old lady incapable of managing money, remained seated on that cold wooden bench, with my hands clasped in my lap, feeling like 34 years of silence and humiliation had finally found a voice. But to understand how I arrived at that moment, I need to go back to the beginning of that horrible day. At 7 in the morning, when I woke up, knowing I would face the worst betrayal of my life, I dressed in that pearl gray suit that has always given me confidence. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed for attention. I had learned decades ago that women like me, those of us who build empires from scratch, must move in silence. Breakfast remained untouched on the table. I could not swallow a thing. My attorney, Sarah Jenkins, had called me the night before to go over the strategy. "Eleanor, stay calm, no matter what they say. Let them hang themselves with their own rope." Those had been her exact words. I arrived at the courthouse at 8:30. The building was one of those concrete monsters the government built in the 70s, with hallways that smelled of dampness and worn carpets that were once green. The courtroom was on the 3rd floor. When I pushed open those double dark wood doors, my eyes immediately met William's, my firstborn, 42 years old. The boy I held against my chest while he cried because his father had just died looked at me with a coldness I had never seen in him, as if I were a stranger, as if the thousands of breakfasts I made him, the sleepless nights when he had a fever, the loans he never paid back, simply did not exist. Caroline was sitting next to him, 38 years old, my only daughter. I remembered the day she was born, how I swore she would never go through the hardships I went through. I gave her everything. The Ivy League school, which cost $40,000 a year, the new car when she turned 21, the $50,000 for her wedding at that 5-star hotel where they served lobster to 200 guests. And there she was, in that black dress that I probably paid for too, holding a tissue as if I had just died. Tyler, the youngest, 35 years old, stared at the floor. He had always been the biggest coward of the 3, the one who let his siblings make the decisions while he just went with the flow. I sat on the bench designated for me. Sarah sat next to me and squeezed my hand briefly. Judge Harold Miller entered through the side door. We all stood up. He was a man of about 60, with that tired air of someone who has watched too many families destroy themselves in his courtroom. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and reviewed the documents in front of him. Case number 74,312. William Vance, Caroline Vance Davis, and Tyler Vance versus Eleanor Vance. Petition for guardianship due to alleged mental and financial incapacity. His voice was monotone, as if reading a grocery list. Richard Sterling stood up, tall, silver hair, perfectly slicked back, a black suit that probably cost $5,000. He had that smile that did not reach his eyes. That smile he had perfected while charging $800 an hour to tear families apart. "Your Honor," he began with a deep, controlled voice. "We are here for a reason as painful as it is necessary. Mrs. Vance's children love her deeply, but love, Your Honor, sometimes forces us to make difficult decisions to protect those we care about most." He paused for calculated effect. He looked toward where my children were. William nodded solemnly. Caroline brought the tissue to her eyes. Sterling continued. Mrs. Eleanor Vance is 68 years old. Over the last few months, her children have observed a progressive deterioration in her cognitive abilities. She forgets important conversations. She makes erratic financial decisions. She shows clear signs of confusion and disorientation. Every word was a stab wound. More worrying still, Your Honor, is that Mrs. Vance handles considerable assets, and in her current state, she represents a danger to herself and to the estate she worked so hard to build. Her children are not looking to enrich themselves. They are looking to protect her. Liar, damned liar. But I stayed still. Sarah had warned me. No emotional reactions. Judges hated drama. We will present testimony from people close to Mrs. Vance, Sterling continued, who will confirm this deterioration. We will present medical evaluations, and we will demonstrate, without a doubt, that this good woman needs someone else to manage her affairs before it is too late. He sat down. William whispered something in his ear. Caroline sobbed discreetly. Judge Miller looked directly at me for the first time. Mrs. Vance, do you understand why you are here today? I stood up. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Yes, Your Honor. I understand perfectly. And you have legal representation? Sarah stood up. Sarah Jenkins, Your Honor. I represent Mrs. Vance. The judge nodded and checked his schedule. Very well. We will proceed with the testimonies. Mr. Sterling, call your first witness. And so the nightmare began. The first witness was a woman I had never seen in my life. She introduced herself as Brenda Higgins, supposedly a former employee of one of my stores. She wore a cheap lavender dress and scuffed shoes. When she raised her right hand to swear in, I noticed it was trembling. Mr. Sterling approached her with that rehearsed smile. Miss Higgins, how long did you work for Mrs. Vance? Brenda cleared her throat. 3 years, sir, at the downtown store. Lie. I knew every employee who had worked for me in the last 20 years. I kept personal records of everyone. Birthdays, names of their children, family situations. That woman had never set foot in any of my stores. And during that time, did you notice anything unusual in Mrs. Vance's behavior? Brenda nodded with too much enthusiasm. Yes, sir. Lately, she would arrive and forget meetings she had scheduled herself. Once she asked me for the sales report 3 times in the same day, as if she didn't remember asking for it. And she made strange decisions, like ordering merchandise we didn't need and rejecting important orders. Every word was perfectly memorized. How much had they paid her? I wondered. $1,000? $2,000? The price of loyalty seemed quite low these days. Did you ever express concern about this? Yes, sir. I spoke with Mr. William about it. I told him his mother seemed confused, that I was worried about her health. William nodded from his seat, with a grave expression. What an actor. He should have gone into theater instead of ruining the legal profession. Judge Miller was taking notes. Sarah leaned toward me and whispered, Do you know her? I shook my head. I have never seen her. Sarah wrote something in her notebook. Sterling continued, extracting every carefully constructed lie from Brenda's mouth. When he finished, Sarah stood up for cross-examination. Miss Higgins, you said you worked at the downtown store for 3 years. Can you tell us the exact address of that store? Brenda blinked. East Main Street. Number? I don't remember the exact number, ma'am. It's been months since I quit. I see. And the name of that store's manager? Silence. Brenda looked toward where William was. He kept his gaze forward, but I saw his jaw clench. No, I don't remember his name right now. You don't remember the name of your direct boss? Interesting. And how much were you paid to come testify today? Sterling jumped from his seat. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is badgering the witness. Judge Miller raised a hand. Overruled. The witness may answer. Brenda wrung her hands. Nobody paid me anything. I came because it's the right thing to do. Liar. Sarah smiled. I have no further questions, Your Honor. Brenda practically ran off the stand. The next witness was worse. An accountant named Robert Stone. Notice the generic name. This man claimed to have reviewed some of my financial statements and found worrying irregularities. He spoke of senseless transfers, impulsive investments, unexplained expenses, all false, all fabricated. But it sounded convincing. He had charts, numbers, projections. People always believe in numbers, even when they lie. When Sarah cross-examined him, the guy contradicted himself 3 times, but the damage was done. I saw Judge Miller frowning as he reviewed the documents. Then came the supposed medical report. A doctor who had never examined me. A certain Dr. Stevens who was not even present, but whose report Sterling presented as evidence. According to that paper, I showed signs of early dementia, cognitive decline, short-term memory loss, all based on a consultation that never existed. Sarah objected. Your Honor, this document lacks validity. Mrs. Vance was never examined by this physician. Sterling smiled. The doctor performed his evaluation based on interviews with close family members and observation of documented behavioral patterns. It is a perfectly valid method for preliminary evaluation. The judge allowed the document to remain in the file. I felt the ground moving beneath my feet. Then William asked for permission to speak. The judge granted it. My eldest son stood up, adjusted that gray suit I had bought him, and walked to the front with measured steps. When he spoke, his voice trembled with perfectly calculated emotion. Your Honor, this is the hardest thing I have ever had to do in my life. I love my mother. I love her with all my heart. She raised us alone after Dad died. She worked day and night to give us everything. I never heard her complain. Never. He paused. He brought a hand to his eyes. Caroline sobbed audibly from her seat. But lately, Your Honor, she is no longer the same woman. She forgets we spoke. She calls me at midnight confused, asking where Dad is, and Dad died 34 years ago. 3 months ago, she tried to sell one of her properties for half its real value because a stranger convinced her on the street. More lies. I had never tried to sell anything. I never called him at midnight. The last time we spoke on the phone was 6 months ago, when I denied him another loan. I have begged her to see a doctor. She refuses. I have begged her to let me help her with the finances. She refuses. And meanwhile, Your Honor, she is burning through the estate she built over decades. She is making decisions that are going to leave her destitute, and we, her children, cannot stand by with our arms crossed watching her destroy herself. He turned to me. Tears were running down his cheeks. Damn actor. Mom, please, let us help you. We don't want your money. We want you to be okay, to be safe, so they don't take advantage of you. The courtroom was silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to have stopped making noise. Some people in the public benches were wiping their eyes. Judge Miller was looking at me with something that looked like pity, and I understood in that moment that I had completely underestimated my children. They weren't just greedy. They were intelligent monsters. They had built a perfect narrative. The senile mother, the loving children, desperately trying to protect her. Every lie fit with the next. Every false witness reinforced the story. Caroline was next to speak. She approached the stand, wiping her tears with that crumpled tissue. Your Honor, my mother was always my hero. When I was a little girl, I watched her leave for work before dawn and return after dark. We never had much, but she made sure we didn't lack anything important. Her voice cracked. But now, Your Honor, I am terrified. Last week I went to visit her and found the stove on, with nothing cooking. Her car keys were in the refrigerator. She had forgotten to pay the electric bill, and they almost cut off the service. I asked her if she was okay, and she said yes, that everything was perfect, but her eyes were empty, as if she didn't really recognize me. Every word from Caroline was poison disguised as concern. She had never come to visit me last week. In fact, the last time I saw her was 4 months ago, when she appeared at my house asking for $50,000 for an emergency she never explained. I gave her $20,000. She thanked me with a cold hug and left. I didn't hear from her again until I received the court summons. But there she was, crying in front of the judge as if she were the devoted daughter of the year. My husband and I have talked about bringing her to live with us, Caroline continued. But she refuses. She says she doesn't need anyone's help, that she can take care of herself. But she can't, Your Honor. She can't anymore. And it terrifies me to think that one day I'm going to get a call saying something terrible happened to her because we didn't do anything to protect her. Judge Miller wrote something in his notes. Caroline returned to her seat, and Tyler put an arm around her shoulders. What a touching picture of family unity. Richard Sterling stood up again. Your Honor, as you can see, this is not a case of greedy children trying to rob their mother. This is a desperate family trying to save a woman from mental decline before it is too late. Mrs. Vance built a considerable estate, working tirelessly for decades. It would be a tragedy to allow that estate to be lost due to decisions made by someone who no longer has the mental capacity to manage it. He made a dramatic pause. That is why we respectfully request that this court appoint William Vance as legal guardian and administrator of his mother's assets. He is an attorney, he knows the laws, he understands finances. No one is better qualified to protect Mrs. Vance's interests than her own son. William nodded with fake humility. As if this responsibility were a terrible burden he was willing to bear out of filial love. The judge took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "Counselor Jenkins, do you wish to present your case?" Sarah stood up. "Your Honor, everything you have heard today is a carefully orchestrated fabrication. The first witness, Brenda Higgins, never worked for my client. I can prove it with the payroll records of all of Mrs. Vance's stores for the last 10 years. That woman does not appear in any of them." Sterling objected. "Your Honor, Miss Higgins worked under a temporary contract. It is possible she does not appear in certain records." Sarah ignored him. The accountant they presented contradicted himself multiple times during my cross-examination, and the supposed medical report comes from a doctor who never examined my client. As for the accusations of William and Caroline Vance, they are simply that, accusations without evidence. The judge raised a hand. "Does Counselor Jenkins have witnesses to present contrary testimony?" "I have something better, Your Honor. I have facts." Sarah pulled a folder from her briefcase. "Mrs. Vance is not only in full possession of her mental faculties, but she is one of the most successful entrepreneurs in this region. Her companies generate jobs for more than 400 direct employees. Her financial statements show constant growth year after year. Far from deteriorating, her commercial empire is at its peak." Sterling stood up. "Your Honor, past success does not guarantee present competence. An athlete may have been an Olympic champion, but if they develop a medical condition that affects their performance, that does not negate the reality of their current situation." The judge seemed to consider this. "My heart was beating so hard I thought everyone could hear it." Sarah continued. "I request that an independent psychiatric evaluation of my client be ordered, not by a doctor hired by the opposing party, but by an expert appointed by this court. The results will speak for themselves. It was a good strategy, but also risky. What if the expert was bought? What if William had gone further than we imagined?" Judge Miller checked his calendar. "Very well. I will order a full psychiatric evaluation, but in the meantime, I need to review the estate in question. Mr. Sterling mentioned that Mrs. Vance manages considerable assets. How considerable?" Sterling smiled. It was the question he had been waiting for. "Your Honor, according to our investigations, Mrs. Vance owns a chain of fabric stores, an apartment downtown, and some minor investments. We estimate the total value at approximately $2 million. William nodded. "It is a significant estate, Your Honor. Too much for a person in my mother's condition to manage alone." The judge made notes. "And you seek to administer all of this?" "Only until Mom recovers," William said with a soft voice. "Or until she can name someone she trusts to help her. We don't want to keep anything. We just want to protect her." Liar. I knew exactly what they wanted. They wanted my bank account to pay their debts. They wanted my apartment to sell it. They wanted the companies to liquidate them and split the cash. I had seen it coming for months, ever since I started denying them money. Caroline had come first, with her story that her husband's business was in trouble. I gave her $20,000. 2 weeks later, she came back asking for $30,000 more. I refused. William appeared the following month. He needed $60,000 for an investment opportunity he couldn't pass up. I also refused. His legal cases weren't going well. He had lost 3 major malpractice suits. His clients were abandoning him. He needed money desperately. Tyler was the last. He came with that sad puppy look he always used when he needed something. He had invested in cryptocurrency. Lost everything. $120,000 evaporated. He needed me to cover his debts, or the lenders were going to take his car, his house, everything. I told him no, that it was time he learned to live with the consequences of his decisions. He left without saying a word. And 2 weeks later, I received the summons. My 3 children, united for the first time in years, not by love but by greed. Judge Miller closed his folder. Very well, I am going to order the following. Independent psychiatric evaluation of Mrs. Vance to be performed within the next 10 days. Full audit of her assets and financial status, and until we have the results of both things, the status quo will be maintained. Mrs. Vance retains control of her assets. William tensed. Caroline whispered something urgent to Sterling. The lawyer stood up quickly. Your Honor, with all due respect, 10 days could be too long. If Mrs. Vance makes any reckless financial decision in that period, the damage could be irreversible. We request that an immediate temporary administrator be appointed. The judge looked at him sternly. Mr. Sterling, you just spent 2 hours arguing that this woman is incapacitated. Now you suggest that in 10 days she is going to dismantle an empire she built over 34 years? Which is it? Sterling hesitated. Your Honor, we simply express our concern. Concern noted and overruled. Mrs. Vance retains control of her assets until I say otherwise. Anything else? Sarah stood up. Yes, Your Honor. I request that a complete and detailed inventory of all my client's assets be presented. Not an estimate. A real, official, certified inventory. The judge nodded. Granted. The court will appoint a court officer to compile that inventory based on official documents, public records, and tax returns of Mrs. Vance. Mr. Sterling, make sure your team cooperates by providing any documents they have. Sterling looked uncomfortable for the first time. Your Honor, we only have preliminary estimates. Then the officer will work directly with Mrs. Vance and her attorney. The complete list must be ready in 3 days. We will continue this hearing on Thursday at 9 in the morning. Court is adjourned. The gavel hit the wood, and the sound resonated in my bones like a sentence. 3 days. I had 3 days before my life was decided in that court. Sarah gathered her documents with quick, precise movements. I remained seated, watching my 3 children leave the room without even looking at me. William walked in front, phone already glued to his ear. Caroline followed him, that tissue still in her hand like a theater prop. Tyler went last, dragging his feet, unable to lift his gaze from the floor, coward until the last moment. When the room emptied, Sarah sat next to me. Eleanor, I need you to tell me the absolute truth. Is there anything at all, that they can use against you? Any questionable financial decision, any episode of confusion, anything? I looked her directly in the eyes. Nothing. I keep a record of every penny that enters and leaves my accounts for 30 years. I have copies of every contract, every invoice, every investment decision, and as for my mind, Sarah, it is clearer than ever, especially now that I finally see my children for who they really are. She nodded. Good. Because in 3 days, when that officer reads the list of your assets in front of the judge, I need everything to be spotless. No surprises, nothing they can twist to make you look bad. There will be no surprises, I assured her. But even as I said it, a part of me smiled on the inside. Because there would be a surprise. Only it wouldn't be for me. That night, in my apartment, I took out all the files. I spread them out on the dining room table, that large mahogany table where we once celebrated birthdays and Christmases when my children still pretended to love me. Property deeds, stock certificates, bank statements, business contracts, investment documents, the physical evidence of 34 years of tireless work. I remembered the day it all began. I was 34 years old. William was 8. Caroline, 4. Tyler had just turned 1. My husband, Robert, had died 3 months earlier in a car accident. A truck ran a red light. He died instantly, and I was left alone with 3 children, a rented 2-bedroom apartment, and debts totaling $80,000. Robert's parents offered help that came with conditions. They wanted me to give them the children. They said I couldn't raise them alone, that they needed a complete family, that they had resources. I told them I would rather live on the street than be separated from my children. They never forgave me for that. I stopped speaking to them 20 years ago. So I did the only thing I knew how to do: work. I had a sewing machine that my mother had given me when I got married. I started doing clothing alterations for neighbors. $5 to hem pants, $10 to adjust a dress, $15 for complex repairs. I worked from 5 in the morning until midnight. The children slept in the only bedroom. I slept on the sofa when I slept. After 6 months, I had saved enough to buy a second sewing machine. I hired a neighbor to help me. After a year, we had 5 machines and a small storefront. I kept doing alterations, but I also started selling fabric, scraps at first, leftovers that manufacturers sold cheap. But I discovered something. The women who came to buy fabric to make their children's clothes spent more than those who only brought repairs. So I expanded the inventory. I got a loan of $20,000 using the store as collateral. I bought full rolls of fabric directly from the manufacturers. Prices went down, sales went up. In 3 years, I had 2 stores. In 5, I had 5. William entered college when he was 18. I had 8 stores. I paid every penny of his education, $45,000 a year for 4 years, plus books, apartment, car. In total, I invested $200,000 in his education. When he graduated, I gave him $50,000 more to open his firm. "Thanks, Mom," he told me. "I'm going to pay you back for everything." I never saw a dime. Caroline wanted a princess wedding. 200 guests at the most expensive hotel in the city. Dress imported from France, which cost $15,000. Flowers, music, food, drink. The total was $120,000. "Mom, it's the most important day of my life," she told me. "I'm only going to get married once." I gave her everything she asked for. Her marriage lasted well. Her husband, a charming man named Javier, turned out to be incompetent at business. Every venture he touched turned to ash. And every time that happened, Caroline came to ask me for money. "Mom, it's just a loan. We'll pay you back in 6 months." 6 months turned into a year turned into never. Tyler was the worst. He was always the weakest of the 3, the one who needed more attention, more validation, more of everything. When he finished college, he didn't know what to do with his life. He tried 5 different jobs in 3 years. None of them he liked. None were good enough for him. Finally, he decided he wanted to be an investor. I gave him $100,000 to start. He lost it in a year in pyramid schemes and cryptocurrency. He came for more. I gave him $50,000. He lost it in 6 months. And so it was, year after year, my 3 children, taking and taking and taking, without giving anything in return, except obligatory visits at Christmas and birthdays, where they treated me with that forced courtesy reserved for annoying relatives. They never cared how I was. They never asked if I needed help with the stores, if I was tired, if I felt lonely in that big apartment where I raised the memories of when they were children. They only wanted to know when I was going to give them more money. 6 months ago, I decided it was enough. William came, asking for $60,000. "Mom, I have an amazing investment opportunity, but I need to act fast." I asked for details. He got evasive. "It's complicated, Mom. You wouldn't understand. It's business stuff." "Then no," I said. His face changed. The mask of the loving son cracked for a second, and I saw the rage underneath. "Excuse me?" I said, "No, William. I am not going to give you more money without knowing what it is for." He stood up. "Mom, I am your son. Don't you trust me?" "Not anymore," I replied. And it was the most liberating truth I had said in years. He left, slamming the door. Caroline appeared 3 weeks later. Same story. Emergency she couldn't explain. $30,000. I also told her no. She cried. She screamed. She accused me of being selfish, of not understanding how hard her life was, of having money and denying it to my own daughter. "You are 48 years old, Caroline," I told her. "It is time you solved your own problems." Tyler was the last. $120,000 to cover debts from his failed investments. "Mom, please, they are going to take everything. My house, my car, I'm going to be on the street." I offered him something different. "Come work with me. I will give you a fair salary. Learn the business. Build something real instead of chasing impossible dreams." He looked at me as if I had spit on him. "Work for you? In your fabric stores?" "Mom, I am not an employee. I am an entrepreneur." "Then be an entrepreneur with your own money," I replied. He also left furious. And 2 weeks later, the court summons arrived. My 3 children, united for the first time in years, not by brotherly love, but because finally there was someone they could conspire against together. Me. Now, sitting in my apartment surrounded by documents, preparing for Thursday's hearing, I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity. I had spent 34 years building an empire while raising 3 ungrateful children alone. I had survived poverty, widowhood, discrimination for being a businesswoman in a man's world, sleepless nights, rejected loans, economic crises. I wasn't going to let my own children destroy everything I had worked for. Thursday came like an inevitable sentence. I woke up at 5 in the morning. Although the hearing wasn't until 9. I hadn't slept well in 3 nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw William's face when he said he loved me, with those fake tears running down his cheeks. I dressed in the same pearl gray suit. Sarah had suggested something different, something that would make me look more vulnerable, more maternal. I told her to dress me as what I was, a businesswoman who had nothing to be ashamed of. The coffee went cold in the cup without me touching it. My stomach was closed, turned into a tight fist of nerves and contained rage. I arrived at the court at 8:30. Sarah was already there, with 2 briefcases full of documents. "Ready?" she asked me. "I was born ready," I replied. When we entered the room, my children were already seated. William was reviewing papers with Mr. Sterling. Caroline was looking at her phone with a frown. Tyler was drumming his fingers on the table, nervous. None of them looked at me when I passed. It was as if I were invisible, as if they had already won and only the formality of the verdict was missing. The room filled up more than last time. There were journalists. I didn't know how they found out, but there they were, with their recorders and notebooks. A 68-year-old businesswoman being sued by her own children for mental incapacity. It was the kind of story that sold newspapers. Judge Harold Miller entered punctually at 9. We all stood up. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and opened the folder in front of him with slow and deliberate movements. "Good morning. We continue with case 74,312. I understand that the court officer has completed the requested asset inventory." A thin man of about 50 stood up from a corner of the room. He wore a brown suit and a thick folder under his arm. "That is correct, Your Honor. I have compiled a complete inventory based on public records, tax returns, property deeds, and documentation provided by Mrs. Vance and her legal representative." The judge nodded. "Proceed. Read the inventory for the record." The officer opened his folder. William leaned forward in his seat. Sterling had that confident smile of someone who believes he has absolute control of the situation. Caroline put down her phone and paid full attention for the first time in the entire process. The officer cleared his throat and began reading in a monotone voice. Inventory of assets belonging to Eleanor Vance. Item number 1. Chain of commercial stores registered under the name Vance Textiles. Total units. 47 stores distributed across 12 states. Estimated value according to last appraisal, $18 million. The silence that followed was deafening. William blinked. Sterling stopped smiling. Caroline opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The judge looked up from his notes and looked at the officer. "Pardon? 18 million. "That is correct, Your Honor. $18 million. I have here the independent appraisals performed last year for insurance and tax purposes." The officer continued unmoved. Item number 2. Real estate properties. 3 commercial buildings downtown, fully paid off. Address 1, 345 Liberty Avenue. Address 2, 212 Commerce Street. Address 3, 101 Central Plaza. Joint value, according to municipal appraisal, $12 million. Caroline grabbed the edge of the table. Her knuckles went white. Tyler had stopped breathing. Item number 3. Shareholding in Logistics and Transportation Company. Midwest Logistics Incorporated ownership percentage. 65% of shares. Current market value, according to last stock evaluation, $22 million. It was at that moment that Judge Harold Miller recoiled sharply in his chair. His eyes opened so wide I thought his glasses were going to fall off. He took off his glasses with trembling hands, cleaned them once, twice, 3 times, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. He put them back on and looked at the document the officer was holding. "Wait," said the judge with a tense voice. $22 million in a single trucking company? The officer nodded. That is correct, Your Honor. Mrs. Vance acquired majority stake 15 years ago when the company was in bankruptcy. She restructured it completely. Now it is one of the 3 largest logistics companies in the region, with current contracts with national supermarket chains and department stores. William had stood up without realizing it. Sterling pulled his arm to make him sit down, but he didn't seem to feel it. He was looking at the officer as if he were speaking in another language. The officer continued reading with the same impassive voice. Item number 4. Rural property, Willow Creek Farm, located in Green Valley County. Extension, 2,000 acres. Includes main house, 3 worker houses, stables, storage warehouse, automated irrigation system. Main activity, organic cotton cultivation, supplying the Vance Textiles store chain. Value according to appraisal, $8 million. I could see my children's brains trying to process the numbers. They added and couldn't believe the total. The officer turned to the next page. Item number 5. Diversified investment portfolio. Stocks in national and international markets, government bonds, investment funds in 8 different countries. Total portfolio value according to last statement, $31 million. Caroline made a choked sound, as if someone had punched her in the stomach. Item number 6. Nonprofit Educational Foundation. The Arthur Vance Foundation. Registered 10 years ago in honor of Mrs. Vance's late husband. The foundation grants scholarships to children of single mothers for university studies. Current fund endowment, $5 million. Note: this asset cannot be liquidated or transferred according to foundation statutes. The judge leaned forward. What else is there? The officer turned another page. Item number 7. 2 additional apartments, one on the coast, another in the mountains. Joint value, $3 million. Item number 8. Art collection acquired over 20 years. Mainly works by emerging Latin American artists. Insured value, $1 million. Item number 9. Vehicles. 3 luxury automobiles. Joint value, $400,000. He paused. Item number 10. Bank accounts and certificates of deposit at 6 different financial institutions. Total cash and equivalents, $18 million. The silence in the room was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. The officer closed the folder. Total estimated value of Mrs. Eleanor Vance's estate, $128 million. $128 million. The number floated in the air like an unexploded bomb. William had gone completely pale. Caroline had her hands over her mouth. Tyler looked at the table as if he wanted to disappear through it. Dr. Richard Sterling, that $800 an hour lawyer, who had been so confident, so sure of himself, looked as if someone had dumped a bucket of ice water on him. He stammered something unintelligible. Judge Miller took off his glasses again, left them on the table, rubbed his eyes with both hands. When he looked again, his expression had changed completely. There was no longer pity in his eyes. There was something much more dangerous. Suspicion. Mr. Sterling, said the judge with a dangerously calm voice. You told me that Mrs. Vance managed assets of approximately $2 million. Sterling stood up with difficulty. Your Honor, we. The information we had, the information you had? The judge raised his voice for the first time. We are talking about a discrepancy of $126 million. How is it possible that your investigation was so grotesquely wrong? William tried to intervene. Your Honor, we didn't know. Mom never told us. The judge silenced him with a look. Silence. I haven't given you permission to speak. Then he looked at the officer. Is all this information verifiable? Completely, Your Honor. Each item is backed by official documentation, registered deeds, certified account statements, independent appraisals. Mrs. Vance keeps impeccable records of every financial transaction she has made in the last 30 years. The judge breathed deeply. When he spoke again, his voice cut like a knife. Stop immediately. Don't say anything else. He turned to one of the security officers standing by the door. Call security in here. Now. 2 more officers ran in. William, Caroline, and Tyler froze in their seats. Fear had finally replaced greed on their faces. Judge Miller stood up. I had never seen a judge stand up during a hearing. It was as if the gravity of what had just been discovered physically pulled him out of his seat. "I want independent forensic accountants here in 30 minutes, he ordered a clerk. "Call the district attorney. And I want a state-certified forensic psychiatrist, not one hired by any of the parties." He turned to Richard Sterling, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the last 5 minutes. "Mr. Sterling, you told this court that you were requesting guardianship over a $2 million estate. Now it turns out the real estate is 64 times larger. Do you have any reasonable explanation for this massive discrepancy?" Sterling opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Your Honor, my clients provided me with the information they had. I acted in good faith based on..." "Good faith?" The judge almost spat the words. "Are you telling me you initiated a guardianship process? A process seeking to strip a person of their fundamental rights, without even verifying basic facts? Without consulting public records? Without reviewing tax returns? Without doing the minimum investigation any competent lawyer would do?" Sterling's silence was all the answer needed. The judge turned to William. "You, Attorney William Vance, stand up." William stood up with trembling legs. There was nothing left of that arrogance with which he had entered the first day. "You told this court that your mother was incapable of managing her finances, that she made erratic and impulsive decisions, that she was destroying the estate she had built." William nodded weakly. "Yes, Your Honor. Silence. I didn't finish." The judge slammed his fist on the table. "Your mother, far from destroying her estate, has multiplied it exponentially. She personally manages 47 stores, 3 commercial buildings, a logistics company, a 2,000-acre farm, and an international investment portfolio. And according to this report, the average annual return on her investments in the last 10 years has been 34%. Do you know what that means?" William shook his head. "It means your mother is a better investor than 99% of certified professionals. It means that while you accused her of incompetence, she was beating the market year after year. It means you are a liar or an incompetent, possibly both." Caroline began to cry, but this time they weren't theatrical tears with a prepared tissue. They were genuine sobs of panic. Tyler had put his head in his hands. The judge wasn't finished. "But there is something else that bothers me deeply. You 3 came here with an expensive lawyer, with prepared witnesses, with medical reports from a doctor who never examined the patient. You spent, what, $50,000 on this process? $60,000? Where did that money come from?" No one answered. "I'll tell you where it came from. It came from the loans and gifts your mother has given you for years. Money she earned working 16 hours a day while you lived comfortably. And now you wanted more. Not just more loans. You wanted everything." The judge signaled the security officer. "I want an investigation into the origin of every cent these 3 have spent on legal fees for this case. And I want to know exactly how much money Mrs. Vance has given them in the last 10 years. He turned to me for the first time since starting his diatribe. His expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Vance, how much money do you calculate you have given your children in loans, gifts, and miscellaneous payments in the last decade?" I stood up. My voice came out firm. "Approximately $2,400,000, Your Honor. I have exact records of every transaction if you need them." I heard Caroline moan. William closed his eyes. The judge wrote the number in his notes. $2,400,000. "And in return, they brought you here to declare you incapacitated and take control of $128 million. He looked at my children with contempt that was almost palpable. "Counselor Jenkins, did your client authorize any of these transactions in writing? Are there promissory notes, loan contracts, legal documents?" Sarah stood up. "No, Your Honor. They were informal family gifts and loans." Mrs. Vance trusted her children. "Trusted," repeated the judge. Past tense, very appropriate. At that moment, the first forensic accountant arrived. She was a woman of about 45 with a black briefcase and serious expression. The judge quickly explained the situation and handed her copies of the inventory. She began reviewing them immediately, marking things with a yellow highlighter. 10 minutes later, 2 more experts arrived, and then the forensic psychiatrist, an older man with white hair and a piercing gaze. The judge ordered a 2-hour recess while the experts performed their work. William, Caroline, and Tyler tried to leave the room, but the judge stopped them. "You three aren't going anywhere. You stay here, seated, in silence, until I say otherwise." They sat down. For the next 2 hours, I watched the mask crumble completely. William stared at the ceiling, with silent tears running down his cheeks. They weren't actor tears anymore. They were the tears of a man who knows he ruined his life. Caroline sobbed openly, makeup running, that tissue finally forgotten on the floor. Tyler was shaking, literally shaking as if he were cold, even though the room was warm. Richard Sterling sat alone at his table, head in his hands. He knew his career had just ended. Sarah and I stepped out into the hallway. "Did you know this was going to happen?" she asked me. "I knew the truth would come out," I replied. "But I didn't expect it to be so devastating." "Eleanor, what just happened in there? The judge is furious. I've seen many cases, but I've never seen a judge react like that. Your children aren't just going to lose this case. They're going to face serious consequences." "Good," I said without emotion. "They should." Sarah looked at me with a mix of admiration and something else. "Fear? Respect? Did you ever tell them how much your real estate was worth?" "No. I learned a long time ago to keep that information private. Not even my business partners know the full extent of my investments. Only my accountant and my attorney. And now, the court. Why the secrecy?" I smiled humorlessly. "Because I knew that if my children discovered the truth, this would happen eventually. I just hoped I was wrong." When we returned to the courtroom, the experts were finishing. The woman with the black briefcase approached the judge and handed him a multi-page document. He read it carefully, nodding occasionally. The forensic psychiatrist had been speaking with me for 30 minutes. He asked me questions about dates, names, numbers, historical events. He asked me to solve math problems mentally. He showed me images and asked me to describe them. In the end, he also handed a report to the judge. Judge Miller called the court to order again. "I have reviewed the reports from the forensic accountants. Mrs. Vance's financial records are impeccable. Every transaction is documented. Every investment is justified. Every financial decision shows not only competence, but rare administrative excellence." He looked at William. "Your mother is not destroying her estate. She is growing it at a rate most professional investment funds would envy." Then he held up the psychiatrist's report. "Dr. Williams has evaluated Mrs. Vance using standard protocols for detecting cognitive decline. The results show that her cognitive function is in the 95th percentile for her age group. Her short and long-term memory is excellent. Her logical reasoning ability is intact. There is absolutely no indication of dementia, confusion, or mental incapacity of any kind." William had closed his eyes. Caroline was crying silently. "In fact," the judge continued, "Dr. Williams notes in his report that Mrs. Vance demonstrated cognitive abilities above average, including exceptional ability for complex mental calculations and detailed memory of events that occurred decades ago." The judge left the documents on the table and took off his glasses. When he spoke again, his voice was cold steel. "Now we are going to talk about procedural fraud." The words fell like stones into still water. William opened his eyes abruptly. Sterling lifted his head sharply. "During these 3 days, I have reviewed every document presented by the plaintiffs, and I have found irregularities so serious they border on criminal." The judge pulled out a different folder. "Let's start with the witness, Brenda Higgins." The court officer investigated her identity. "Turns out Miss Higgins has a record for perjury. She testified falsely in an insurance case 5 years ago, served probation, and, curiously, 3 days before her testimony in this court, she received a bank transfer of $5,000 from an account belonging to William Vance." William jumped up. "Your Honor, I can explain." "Sit down." The judge's shout resonated off the walls. "Sit down now, or I will have you arrested for contempt." William collapsed into his chair. "The explanation is obvious," the judge continued. "You hired and paid a false witness to come lie under oath about your own mother. That is witness tampering and obstruction of justice." Caroline had started hyperventilating. She was breathing in short, quick gasps. Someone from the public gallery brought her a glass of water, but she couldn't hold it. Her hands were shaking too much. The judge didn't stop. "Then we have the accountant, Robert Stone. I investigated his professional license. It was suspended 2 years ago for filing fraudulent reports in a divorce case. He is not authorized to practice. Yet, here he is, presenting financial analyses that are pure fiction. He looked directly at Richard Sterling. Mr. Sterling, did you verify this accountant's credentials before presenting him as an expert witness? Sterling didn't answer. He couldn't. The answer was obvious. And, finally, the medical report. The judge held the document as if it were trash. The supposed doctor who diagnosed Mrs. Vance with dementia without ever examining her. I had my team investigate. Dr. Morris Stevens lost his medical license 3 years ago for falsely diagnosing patients so their families could access life and disability insurance. He is currently facing criminal charges in another state. The judge dropped the paper on the table with disgust. Everything you presented is false. Every testimony, every document, every supposed piece of evidence, it is a complete construction of lies designed to strip a competent woman of her rights and her estate. He turned to the security officers. I want these 3 to remain in this room. No one leaves until I authorize it. William finally found his voice, desperate and broken. Your Honor, please, we just wanted. Mom was making decisions we didn't understand. We thought she needed help. Decisions you didn't understand? The judge leaned forward. Like investing in international markets? Like diversifying her portfolio? Like creating an educational foundation? Those decisions? She was denying us money, Caroline screamed suddenly. Her voice was hysterical, broken. She has $128 million and she denied us $50,000. We are her children. We have a right. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop working. Caroline realized too late what she had just said. She brought her hands to her mouth, eyes wide open. But it was too late. The truth was out. Not concern for my well-being. Not filial love. Greed. Pure and simple. The judge looked at her with an expression that could freeze hell. Thank you, Miss Davis, for finally telling the truth. This was never about protecting your mother. It was about money. About feeling entitled to her fortune simply for being her daughter. He looked at the 3 of them. Let me explain something to you about rights. Parents have a legal obligation to support their children until they are adults. After that, they have no obligation. 0. Your mother gave you education, paid for weddings, gave you loans you never paid back. She gave you $2,400,000 over the years, and when she finally said it was enough, you brought her here to rob her of everything. Tyler began to cry openly. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to. They convinced me. They said it was best. Silence, ordered the judge. Now is too late for apologies. He turned to Richard Sterling. As for you, Mr. Sterling, the Bar Association will receive a full report of this case today. You presented false witnesses, an unlicensed accountant, and a fraudulent medical report. You initiated a guardianship process without doing the basic required investigation. And you charged, according to my calculations, approximately $75,000 in fees for this fraud. Sterling had lost all color in his face. Your Honor, I acted on my client's instructions. Your clients lied to you and you chose not to verify. That makes you an accomplice. I hope you enjoyed those $75,000 because they will be the last you earn as a lawyer. I guarantee you will be disbarred before the end of the month. The judge breathed deeply, as if he needed to calm down before continuing. When he spoke again, his voice was final. I am going to issue my ruling now. The request for guardianship is denied in its entirety. Mrs. Eleanor Vance is in full possession of her mental faculties and is perfectly capable of managing her own affairs. In fact, she is more capable than the vast majority of people I know. William dropped his head onto the table. But that is not all. The judge pulled out another document. Due to the fraudulent nature of this process and the clear, malicious intentions of the plaintiffs, I am ordering the following. He paused. The silence was unbearable. First, William Vance, as a licensed attorney who initiated a fraudulent legal process, will be reported to the Bar Association for disciplinary proceedings. I will recommend permanent suspension of your license. William emitted a sound like a wounded animal. Second, the 3 plaintiffs are prohibited from approaching Mrs. Eleanor Vance for a period of 5 years. This includes physical, telephone, electronic contact, or through third parties. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Caroline sobbed uncontrollably. Third, I am ordering a full investigation by the district attorney regarding possible procedural fraud, witness tampering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Criminal charges are a real possibility. Tyler had put his head between his knees, shaking. Fourth, all of Mrs. Vance's legal expenses in this case will be paid jointly by the plaintiffs. This includes attorney fees, expert expenses, and court costs. I calculate the total at approximately $150,000. The judge looked directly at my children. And fifth, I am issuing a financial protection order. Any future attempt to access Mrs. Vance's accounts, properties, or assets without her explicit written consent will be considered attempted fraud and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. He closed his folder with a sharp slam. This is one of the most disgusting cases I have seen in 30 years of a judicial career. 3 perfectly capable adults conspiring to rob their own mother using the legal system as a weapon. I am ashamed that this reached my courtroom. He stood up. Case closed. Officer, escort the plaintiffs out of the building, and make sure they understand that if I see any of them in this court again for matters related to Mrs. Vance, I will personally file charges for contempt. The gavel hit the wood one last time. The sound resonated like thunder. William tried to stand up, but his legs didn't respond. 2 officers had to help him up. Caroline walked like a zombie, eyes empty and cheeks wet. Tyler went between them, cowering, defeated. When they passed by me, William stopped. He looked at me for the first time in the whole process, really looked at me, not through me or over me. "Mom," he whispered. His voice was that of a scared child. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I looked into his eyes, those eyes that once looked at me with genuine love when he was a small boy. "Me too," I replied. And it was the truth. I regretted it had come to this. I regretted raising 3 children so selfish that they preferred to destroy me rather than work for themselves. I regretted every sacrifice I made, every sleepless night, every meal I skipped so they could eat. But I didn't regret what had just happened. The officers took them away. Sarah hugged me. "We won," she whispered. "Yes," I replied. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a funeral. Reporters surrounded me as soon as I left the court. Microphones and cameras appeared from all directions like birds of prey. "Mrs. Vance, how do you feel after the verdict? Are you going to forgive your children? Is it true you are worth $128 million? Do you plan to sue them for the loans they never paid back?" Sarah protected me with her body as we walked toward the parking lot. I didn't answer any questions. I didn't have the energy to explain to strangers the pain of being betrayed by the 3 people you brought into the world. When we finally reached my car, I sat behind the wheel and couldn't move my hands. They were frozen on the steering wheel, gripping it until my knuckles turned white. Sarah sat in the passenger seat. "Do you want me to drive?" I shook my head. I breathed deep 3 times and started the engine. The way home was a blur. I don't remember if I passed red or green lights. I don't remember if there was traffic. I only remember arriving at my apartment, that large apartment on the 18th floor where I had lived for the last 15 years, and feeling that it had never been so empty. On the walls were photos of my children, William in his graduation gown, Caroline on her wedding day in that $15,000 white dress, Tyler on his first day of college. Fake smiles captured in moments I believed meant something. I poured myself a glass of whiskey. I don't usually drink, but that night I needed something that burned more than the betrayal. I sat on the sofa where I used to read them stories when they were little, where William would curl up against me when he had nightmares after his father died, where Caroline showed me her drawings of princesses and castles, where Tyler fell asleep while I worked on my laptop, his head resting on my shoulder. At what point did they become strangers? At what point did love transform into greed? The phone rang 17 times that night. I didn't answer any calls. Some were reporters, others were acquaintances who had just found out and were calling with that morbid curiosity disguised as concern. One was Caroline's number. She left a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I deleted everything without hearing a single word. At 2 in the morning, I was still awake. staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the decisions I made over the years. Should I have been tougher on them? Should I have forced them to work in the stores when they were teenagers, instead of giving them everything on a platter? Should I have taught them the value of money by denying some of their extravagant requests? But every time I thought that, I remembered the promise I made to myself when Robert died. My children would never go hungry, as I did as a child. They would never have to wear their cousins' patched clothes. They would never have to sell candy on the street to pay for school supplies. I gave them everything I never had, and in return, they wanted to take everything I had built. The irony was so bitter I could almost taste it. Over the next few weeks, the story exploded in the media. Millionaire businesswoman sued by own children. Greedy children try to rob mother's fortune. Fraudulent guardianship case exposes family greed. My face appeared in newspapers, news programs, radio shows. Some painted me as a heroine. Others insinuated that I must have done something wrong for my own children to hate me so much, as if the fault were mine. The district attorney, a man named Adrian Roberts, summoned me to give a statement. He asked me questions for 4 hours about every interaction with my children in recent years. Every loan, every gift, every conversation. Did they ever threaten to harm you if you didn't give them money? No, they were more subtle than that. They used guilt, emotional manipulation, fake tears. Did you know they were planning this lawsuit? No, until I received the summons. It was like being hit by a train I didn't see coming. Do you want to file additional charges against them? That question made me think. The DA explained that I could sue them civilly for the $2,400,000 I had given them over the years. I could ask for them to be prosecuted for conspiracy to commit grand fraud. I could make their lives a legal hell for years. No, I said finally. No? The DA seemed genuinely surprised. Mrs. Vance, these people tried to rob you of $128 million. They lied under oath. They hired fake witnesses. They fabricated medical evidence. And you have every legal right to. I know, I interrupted. But they have lost enough. William is going to lose his law license. It's the only thing he has. Caroline is going to have to explain to her husband why they are bankrupt paying legal fees. Tyler was already destroyed before this. I don't need to destroy them more. The DA looked at me as if I were a fascinating specimen. You are a very compassionate woman after what they did to you. It's not compassion, I replied. It's exhaustion. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of being angry. And above all, I'm tired of continuing to be linked to them in any way. It was the truth. Every minute I spent thinking about revenge was a minute I continued giving them power over my life. I had given them 34 years. They weren't going to have one more day. The Bar Association suspended William permanently 2 months later. The case was public domain. Dishonest conduct involving procedural fraud and bringing disrepute to the legal profession. His firm closed. His clients abandoned him. I heard through others that he was working as a legal consultant for an insurance company, earning a fraction of what he earned before. Caroline and her husband, Javier, divorced 3 months after the trial. He couldn't forgive her for dragging him into that situation without consulting him. They lost their house, paying the $150,000 in court costs the judge ordered. She had to move to a small apartment in a neighborhood she would never have considered acceptable when she lived on my money. Tyler simply disappeared. He left the city. Someone told me he had gone north, working in construction. I didn't seek to confirm it. It wasn't my problem anymore. But the most shocking news came 6 months after the trial. Richard Sterling had been disbarred, just as the judge promised. Lost his license, lost his prestigious firm. And a week after the association's final decision, he attempted suicide. He survived, but was left with permanent neurological damage. When I heard that, I felt something strange. Not joy, not satisfaction, just a deep sadness for how low a human being can fall for money. Meanwhile, I tried to rebuild my life. Sounded easier than it was. Every time I looked at the photos on the walls, I saw the strangers my children had become. Every time I walked past the guest room where they used to stay when they visited, I remembered they would never come again. One day, 2 months after the trial, I hired a remodeling crew. I want you to change everything, I told them. New floors, new paint, new furniture, everything. They looked at me confused. The apartment was in perfect condition. I just need a change, I explained. And I needed it. I needed to erase every trace of the family I believed I had. While they worked on the apartment, I stayed at my beach house. I spent days walking on the beach, feeling the sand under my feet, letting the sound of the waves drown out the thoughts that kept me awake. It was there, in that house facing the sea that I bought 10 years ago as an investment, where I finally cried. I cried for the little girl I was, who grew up poor and swore her children would never suffer the same. I cried for the young widow who worked to exhaustion to give them a future. I cried for the mother who missed birthdays and school recitals because she was building an empire for them. And I cried for the 68-year-old woman who discovered that all that sacrifice had raised monsters. I cried for 3 days, and afterwards, I stopped crying. I woke up one morning, looked at the ocean from my window, and knew I was done crying for people who never deserved it. I returned to the city with a plan. If my children weren't going to be my legacy, then I would build a different legacy. I called my accountant. I want to expand the Arthur Vance Foundation, I told her. We are going to multiply by 10 the number of scholarships we grant. And I want to create a mentorship program for single mothers who want to start businesses. That is going to cost several million a year, Eleanor. I have several million, I replied. It is time they did something good. Over the next few months, I immersed myself in the foundation's work. I met dozens of women who reminded me of myself 30 years ago. Single mothers working 2 jobs while raising children alone. Women with brilliant ideas but no capital to start them. Smart young women whose families couldn't afford college. I gave them money, yes. But more importantly, I gave them something no one gave me. Mentorship, connections, knowledge. I taught them everything I learned in 34 years of building businesses. How to negotiate with suppliers. How to manage cash flow. How to grow without getting into debt until suffocation. And a strange thing happened. For the first time in decades, I felt genuinely happy. These women thanked me with real tears, not fake ones. They hugged me with genuine affection, not with the mechanical hug of someone expecting something in return. They sought me out not to ask for money, but to share their victories and ask for advice. One of them, a woman named Marisol, 32 years old with 2 children, told me something I will never forget. Mrs. Vance, you are the mother we all should have had. 6 months after the trial, I was sitting in my office reviewing the foundation's financial statements when Sarah appeared without an appointment. She brought a large manila envelope. "What is this?" I asked. "Something you need to see before making a decision." She opened the envelope and pulled out several documents. They were requests from my 3 children to revoke the restraining order. They wanted to have contact with me again. William had written a 6-page letter. I read it in silence. He spoke of regret, of therapy, of how he had hit rock bottom and finally understood what he had done. He said he didn't want money, just the opportunity to apologize face to face. Caroline had written something shorter. She admitted she had been selfish, manipulative, cruel. She said losing everything had taught her the real value of things, that she now worked as a teacher in a public school, earning $1,200 a month, and for the first time in her life understood what it was to earn an honest living. Tyler hadn't written anything. There was only a note from his therapist explaining that he was in treatment for severe depression and substance abuse, and that as part of his recovery, he needed to make amends with the people he had hurt. Sarah watched me. "What are you going to do?" I folded the letters carefully and put them back in the envelope. "Nothing." "Nothing?" she repeated. "The order stands for 5 years. We are only 6 months in. There are still 4.5 years left. If after that time they still want to talk, then I will consider listening to them, but not before." Sarah nodded. She knew enough of me to know that when I made a decision, it was final. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said after a moment. "Do you miss them?" I thought about the question. Really thought. "I miss the children they were," I replied finally. "I miss 8-year-old William hugging me when he was scared. I miss 6-year-old Caroline drawing pictures for me and telling me I was the best mom in the world. I miss baby Tyler falling asleep in my arms." I paused. "But those children died a long time ago. The adults they became are strangers. And no, I don't miss those strangers at all." The truth was liberating. The foundation grew exponentially that year. We granted 120 full university scholarships. We funded 32 new businesses for entrepreneurial mothers. We created a temporary housing program for women escaping domestic violence situations. And every dollar I invested in these women returned, multiplied in the form of genuine gratitude, success stories, and transformed lives. Marisol, the woman who told me I was the mother everyone should have had, opened a bakery with the interest-free loan I gave her. In 8 months, she had paid off the entire loan, not because I demanded it. She did it voluntarily. You trusted me when no one else did, she told me. And I want this money to help another woman like you helped me. I used that repaid money to fund 2 more businesses. And so, a virtuous cycle began. The women I helped succeeded, paid their loans voluntarily, and that money helped more women. My estate, far from diminishing as my children had predicted in court, continued to grow. The stores reported the best year in their history. The logistics company won 3 new contracts with national chains. My international investments yielded 38% that year, breaking my own record. I finished the year with $143 million, $15 million more than when that nightmare began. And this time, every dollar had a purpose that went beyond me. One day, a year after the trial, I received a call from an unknown number. Normally I didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Vance. It was a young woman's voice I didn't recognize. Yes. Who is this? My name is Julia. I am a journalism student at the university. I received one of your scholarships 2 years ago and, well, I wanted to thank you personally. I smiled. It's not necessary, Julia. I'm glad the scholarship helped you. You don't understand. Her voice cracked slightly. Without that scholarship, I would be working in a factory right now, like my mother and grandmother. You changed the complete trajectory of my life. I graduate next month. I got a job at a major newspaper, and it's all thanks to you. I felt something warm in my chest, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Thank you for calling, Julia. That means more to me than you imagine. There is something else, she continued. I am writing an article about your foundation, about all the women you have helped, and I wanted to ask for an interview. I accepted. The interview was published 2 months later in a Sunday supplement. It was a beautiful article that told my story without dramatizing, showed the foundation's work without exaggerating, included testimonies from dozens of women whose lives had been transformed. But the most striking thing was the title, Eleanor Vance, the woman who built a family of 1,000 daughters. I cried when I read it, but this time they were happy tears. The article generated a wave of media attention, but not like before, when it was the court scandal. This time it was different. Other foundations wanted to collaborate. Successful businesswomen wanted to contribute money. Universities invited me to give lectures. And most surprising, hundreds of women wrote me letters telling their own stories of ungrateful children, abusive husbands, families that betrayed them. Thank you for showing us that we can survive, one wrote. Thank you for proving that our value does not depend on those who hurt us, wrote another. I became, unintentionally, a symbol. I didn't choose that role, but I accepted it. Because if my story, however painful it was, could help other women find their strength, then maybe it had all been worth it. 2 weeks ago, I received another letter from William. This time it didn't go through Sarah. He mailed it directly to the apartment, technically violating the restraining order. I opened it. It was short. Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to ever speak to me again. I just want you to know that the man who did that to you in court no longer exists. I lost my career, my reputation, my family. I lost everything. And it was exactly what I deserved. Now I work a modest job. I live in a small apartment. I eat what I can afford. And for the first time in my life, I understand what it means to work for something. I understand what you did for us during all those years, and I understand that we never thanked you. I know it's late. I know I ruined any chance of having a relationship with you, but I needed you to know that finally, I understand, and that I'm sorry. With all my heart, I'm sorry. William, I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it and put it in a drawer in my desk. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't answer either. Maybe one day I would. Maybe in 4 years, when the restraining order expires, I would accept a call. Maybe I would give them the chance to apologize face to face. Or maybe not. I still don't know. And it's okay not to know. Today, as I write this, I am sitting in my office at Willow Creek Farm. Through the window, I see the cotton fields swaying in the wind. In 3 hours, a group of 20 women will arrive for an entrepreneurship workshop that will last all weekend. I will teach them everything I know. I will give them the tools that no one gave me. And maybe, just maybe, one of them will remind her own children that family is not about shared blood, but mutual respect. I am 68 years old. I have built an empire. I have lost a family. I have gained 1,000 daughters I never gave birth to. And finally, after a lifetime of giving and giving and giving to people who only took, I have learned the most important lesson. My value never depended on being a good mother to my children. My value always lay in being a good person to myself. The Arthur Vance Foundation just signed an agreement with the government to expand our program nationally. We are going to help 10,000 women in the next 5 years. My accountant almost fainted when she saw the budget. Eleanor, this is going to cost $40 million. Then it's good that you have $143 million? I replied with a smile. She asked if I wasn't worried about leaving something for my children when I died. My children. I laughed. It was a bitter but liberating laugh. My children are going to receive exactly what they deserve. Nothing. I reorganized my will last month. Everything, absolutely everything, goes to the foundation. The stores, the buildings, the logistics company, the investments, the farm, all of it. Let it continue helping women who really need it long after I am gone. That will be my final revenge. Not in court, not with lawyers, not with judicial orders. My revenge will be living well, helping many, and ensuring that my children see from afar everything they could have had if they had chosen love over greed. And when I finally close my eyes for the last time, I will do so knowing that my life was not defined by those who betrayed me, but by those I helped rise. It took me 68 years to understand that family isn't who shares your blood, but who honors your sweat. And now, every day I wake up on this farm, watching the sunrise over the fields I built with my own work. I feel something I haven't felt in decades: peace. My children wanted to steal everything from me, but the only thing they really managed to do was set me free.